Hey everyone, Macqo here, and since the last topic on this channel was roguelites and roguelikes, then I think it is only fitting for me to talk about the roguelite that I've spent the most hours in, one that has single-handedly started an entire subgenre of roguelikes, so let's talk about Slay the Spire. And let's not get things wrong, Slay the Spire was not the first deck builder, but it surely was the one that has popularized the subgenre. So today we'll talk a bit about the game itself, some of its history, mechanics, etc. But first, before I move on, if you will like the video, remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and maybe leave a comment. I really appreciate that. So, without further ado, let's get on with the video. Before I start praising Slay the Spire and talking about how it basically defined an entire subgenre, we need to ground this properly, because if I just say, well, it's a turn-based roguelite deck builder where you climb a tower using cards, that does not sound revolutionary, and it sounds niche, it sounds like something that would appeal to a very specific type of player. And yet, Slay the Spire ended up becoming a milestone, not only for roguelikes and roguelites, but it also popularized the whole deck building theme for games. So what is it exactly? At its core, Slay the Spire is a roguelite, edging on being a roguelike. Not a traditional roguelike, yet for the sake of this video, I will refer to it as a roguelike later on. You don't create a character from scratch in an ASCII dungeon like Rogue or NetHack. You don't spend 4 hours methodically crawling a floor only to lose everything permanently. Instead, you select one of the 4 predefined characters, each with a fixed starting deck and a mechanical identity, and you attempt to climb a procedurally generated spire made up of 3 acts. Well, officially 3 acts. Each act contains regular combats, elite fights, question mark events, shops, rest sites, and a boss at the very top. If you die, the run ends. You start over, you're donezo. There's no meta progression in the traditional roguelite sense. No permanent stat upgrades, no passive bonuses carrying you through runs. Outside of some unlockable cards and relics expanding the pool, every run starts from the same baseline. You are weak, every single time. And that baseline weakness is important, because Slay the Spire is not about power handed to you. It's about power constructed by you and the choices you make and plan around. It's about risk management. Okay, so before I dive straight into how a run looks like, I think it's only fitting to introduce the first choice that you will need to make before you even start the run. You need to select a character. And well, that's a choice you get later on, after you beat a game with the first character, then second, and so on, but that doesn't matter. Let's just introduce all the characters and I'll expand on them later on. First up, you have the Ironclad. Ironclad is a big buff warrior type character, and he focuses on big, heavy and powerful attacks, self-damage effects with benefits, raw strength and self-healing. He is a perfect introductory character, as his toolkit is very straightforward, yet somewhat deep and allows you to learn the game basics. The second character that you unlock is the Silent. She's more akin to a combo-oriented ninja character with a focus on poisoning the enemy using many small, cheap-costed cards that chip down the enemy, and deck setup and manipulation. And after you finish the game once as the Silent, you unlock the Defect. This character I would say is the most complex, as it introduces another mechanic that adds on a little bit more. On top of manipulating your deck, you also now get cards that give you orbs that do different things, and you need to learn to manage that. Oh yeah, and you also get the greatest card of all time, the Claw. And then finally, last but not least, there's the Watcher. She's a mixed bag. And we'll get to it, but the most important thing you will always be doing as the Watcher is switching stances and learning how to do that effectively. So now, after you've chosen your character, the run begins. From the moment a run begins, you are making decisions. Before you even fight your first enemy, you first see a giant magical whale called Niao who offers you a boon. Now that boon is something that will modify the start of your run. Sometimes it's just you losing a little bit of your max gold or max health to gain something better. Sometimes you just get a rare card for free. Sometimes you get something like a relic that allows you to just one-hit first 3 enemy encounters. And then you can also see a full map of the act. You can see all the branching paths, how and where they intertwine. You can see where elites are, where the rest sites are, where you can see the shops. All of this means you are not stumbling blindly. You don't need to YOLO the whole thing going from one fight to another. You can plan things out. Do you risk an early elite for a powerful relic? Do you maybe take a safer path to stabilize your deck? Should you prioritize question mark events for high variance outcomes? This is something that Slay the Spire does extremely well. It gives you information, and then it lets you decide what you want to do. The difficulty doesn't come from hidden mechanics, it comes from the consequences of your choices. There are no objectively bad choices in events. Everything depends on the context of your run. You know, maybe you want to get those 5 intangible cards and lose 33 HP or however much more you will lose. But sometimes you don't want to lose your max HP and you don't need the intangible cards because you basically gain block passively. Maybe you didn't remove all the strikes from your deck yet, so you can exchange them for the bites to get some more healing and basically get a strike plus with some healing. So, now that you've made your choice, you start in the first combat room, so let's talk combat. In Slay the Spire, combat is fully turn-based, and at the beginning combat looks exactly the same for everyone. Each turn, you will draw 5 cards, start with 3 energy, play cards until you run out of energy and or actions, and then you will end your turn. At the end of your turn, you discard what remains in your hand, and you rinse and repeat. And when you run out of cards, you reshuffle your deck and draw cards again. Then, enemies clearly telegraph their intent. You see if they are attacking, how much damage they'll deal. You'll see if they are buffing or applying debuffs. There are no surprise gacha mechanics. These enemies have their own specific movesets and attack patterns. For instance, you have the Lagavulin elite in Act 1. After it wakes up, it always does the same attack sequence. It attacks with a big hit 2 turns in a row. After that, it debuffs your strength and dexterity, and it repeats. This is the stuff you can plan around. On top of that, at all times you can access information about your cards. How many and which exactly cards are in your draw pile and your discard pile, and which cards have been exhausted, how many potions you have and what they do. It's all there. And because of that, if you die, it's almost always because, well, you didn't scale fast enough, or you blocked inefficiently, maybe you drafted poorly, or you just misjudged risk. And that's where the skill expression begins, because the game is not testing your reflexes or your APM, it's testing your understanding. The understanding of tempo, understanding of scaling, deck consistency, what the enemies will do, what possible events can await you. And unlike action roguelites like Hades, where mechanical skill can carry you through tactical and strategic mistakes, Slay the Spire doesn't let you dodge your bad decisions. If your deck is bad, it will expose you. And now this is where Slay the Spire becomes special. You start every run with a bad deck, a very weak deck. A few strikes, a few defense, 1 or 2 character-specific cards. That's it. No more, no less. You also get your character relic, which is unique to every single character. After each combat, you gain some gold, maybe get a potion, and you're offered 3 cards. You can take one, but you don't have to. You can skip. And that skip button is something that may seem like a dumb choice at first, but it becomes quite important later on. Because in most RPGs you can plan your build ahead of time. You decide, well, I'm going Stealth Archer, or its variant in every Bethesda game ever. Or you can plan to just go full charisma stacking and talk your way out of situations in, for example, Baldur's Gate 3. Or you can go pure strength and you can raw dog a power stancing halberd build in Elden Ring. And you aim for that. In Slay the Spire you can try to force a build, but most of the time that's a mistake. Because every run is different. Every run has a different seed, meaning different card rewards, different relics available, different events, different bosses. Everything is different. You might want to do a poison build, but maybe get some corpse explosion gaming, but the game gives you discard synergies. You might want strength scaling, maybe some multi-attacks to go along with maybe a heavy blade, maybe you got the demon form. But then the relics and powers you get push you into exhaust mechanics, because hey, You know what? That elite there just gave you Charon's Ashes. Now you want to exhaust your stuff. So instead of forcing your will onto the run, you adapt to the run. And that is the heart of the experience. The game constantly asks, what can you make work with this? Not what did you plan before you started? And that's why I said the skip button might be a little bit important later on. Because hey, maybe you finally got a build going, maybe you have everything you need, and you don't need to get, let's say, the 5th acrobatics in your deck as the silent, or maybe you don't need more shivs, or, well, you are only playing shiv builds or discard builds as a silent, and you have everything you need. You don't need some random poison effects. So instead of forcing yourself to take something that you don't need to take, something that will actively harm your deck and make you draw a card that otherwise would have been a different card in your deck that actually is useful for what you're doing, you can just skip it. But you need to understand what you're actually doing with your run and with your deck right now to be able to utilize the skip button properly. And that deck building aspect is the beauty of it, because, you know, at first I thought, well, skipping is so stupid, why wouldn't you want another rare card? Why wouldn't you want a new card in your deck? But then you realize that, well, you do have the good combo in your deck, but to get to it, you need to draw 30 more cards before you can actually do the thing you want to do. Or because you have so many cards, you cannot do everything you wanted to do in the turn you need to do it because, well, your deck is diluted by some random things. So next time you will understand, well, maybe I want to skip some cards. Or even maybe I want to remove some cards from my deck in events or in the shop. That is all just so important when you're building the deck. But, you know, the deck isn't the only thing that you need to understand, because you also have relics. And relics are passive effects you gain throughout the run, and they often are more impactful than individual cards. Some give you occasional extra energy. Some reward specific play patterns like discarding a lot or maybe only playing a certain amount of cards per turn. Some fundamentally change how you value certain cards. And then you have boss relics, and they are powerful, and very often they clearly define the run and how you will approach the subsequent acts. But they also often come with trade-offs. Extra energy, but you cannot heal at rest sites. You get 3 random relics, but now you have a permanent dead card in your deck. This reinforces something very important. Slay the Spire is a game about trade-offs, not just raw upgrades. You are rarely just getting stronger. You are reshaping how your run functions. You want to add this card to your deck? Cool, but now you have more cards to draw from. You wanna skip the card choice to keep your deck consistent? Well, damn, the next fight could have really used that Footwork Plus and that little bit of more dexterity this fight. You could buy this one relic from the shop, but then how are you going to remove that curse that gives you weak affliction? It's all about trade-offs. Every single time you do something, you are closing a different path for yourself and opening 3 other ones. And this game just emphasizes it so much. Now, of course, yes, the game is random. Cards are random, relics are random, events are random, but it never feels like a slot gamba machine. It feels like a controlled variance more often than not. And that is not just a random term. There are actual rules about what are the odds of getting what rarity of cards. Every common card you see in a card award increases the odds of seeing a rare card next time. The uncommon cards don't increase the odds, and when you see a rare card next combat, the odds drop down to baseline value for the next rare card drop. What is the chance of getting a potion after next combat? Well, you start off with a 40% chance of getting a potion after combat on the first floor of an act, and every time you beat a combat encounter, that chance increases by 10% flat. And every time you get a potion, the next time decreases 10%. It all makes sense, even if random. You get 3 cards, multiple path options, relic selections. There is randomness, but there is agency inside that randomness. And that balance between RNG and skill is what makes the game so replayable. Because when you lose, you don't blame the seed. You ask yourself, could I have played that differently? Maybe I should have taken that whirlwind to do more AoE. And most of the time, the answer is yes. So, in the previous parts, I've introduced you to how the game works. But let's talk about what really makes STS click. Because Slay the Spire isn't deep and complex because it's convoluted. It's deep because of interaction density. It's complex because everything feeds into everything else. So let's start with scaling. In early fights, almost any deck can survive. You block either perfectly the amount you need to block, or you take chip damage. You attack, you trade damage. But as you climb, your enemies scale. Some just do more damage straight up, some have more multi-attacks, bosses test something specific. One boss punishes slow scaling, another punishes too much comboing, another punishes using too many powers. And this is where the game separates newer players from experienced ones. Winning here isn't about just pushing damage. It's about scaling and finding synergies. Strength scaling, dex scaling, poison stacking, orb generation, stance abuse, exhaust synergies, infinite draw loops. And here's the important part. You rarely start a run knowing which one you'll end up with. You might open strong strength cards early, but then you get relics that reward exhaust, just like I said earlier. You might try poison, but then you get card draw engines pushing you into combo territory. The game doesn't just reward archetypes, it rewards recognizing which archetype is emerging. And that recognition is what skill is. So earlier on, I introduced the characters of this game, and I said that I will expand on them a little bit later on. And well, that's this moment. Because before I go into the next part, I think I owe you an explanation of what I meant by every character having some different builds they can go for. So let's start with the Ironclad. Like I said, Ironclad is the most straightforward character that has a lot of, let's say, more basic attacks that just tell you, well, you will attack twice with this one, or this attack does a big hit and it scales with strength more, or this is just a big bonk like a bludgeon. And yeah, there are simple cards like that, but then you have stuff like Feel No Pain, which whenever you exhaust a card, meaning you permanently remove it from your play, you will gain block. And then, hey look, there's Dark Embrace. Whenever you exhaust a card, now you draw a card. Oh, and what is that? That's Corruption. Look, every skill you do costs 0, but then it exhausts. So you can do many builds here. You can go for the big bonk stuff. You can go for exhaust. There are some builds that really like it when you, let's say, do an offering, which hurts you, and then you draw a lot of cards and you get some energy. You can permanently upgrade Searing Blow and build around that, although I wouldn't recommend it. There's so many different avenues you can take. There are some Ironclad specific relics, for instance, because Ironclad likes hurting himself with cards like Hemokinesis, and then Blood for Blood basically utilizing the self-hurting mechanic by lowering its own cost. You can also get a Runic Cube as that specific relic, where whenever you lose HP, you draw a card. There's so many different things you can do with Ironclad, and all you need to do is just recognize, hey look, I'm getting a lot of synergies for exhausting. Maybe I should lean into it more. Maybe I should search for cards that could be good. If I found that Corruption, they could be good as one-offs. Then you have stuff for the Silent. Silent, like I said, focuses on either drawing a lot, manipulating your deck using discarding, synergizing with discarding, poisoning enemies, or you can do a lot of small chip damage using shivs. And there are many relics in this game that reward you for playing multiple cards in a turn. There are relics that increase your dexterity and strength whenever you play 3 attacks in a turn, and they just continually scale. There are relics that give you 1 energy when you attack enough times, double damage on attack if you attack enough. If you play 3 skills in a turn, you deal 5 damage, and you can really lean into these relics if you just know what to do. So, you know, sometimes you will see a corpse explosion and think to yourself, yeah, I can work with that. And then you find some poison stuff. You get Envenom, you get Poison Stab. And then with Envenom, well, you can actually bleed a little bit into the Shiv build because you want to poison more with smaller attacks. It all works together if you can recognize it. The defect is like the toughest character that I'll talk about because I don't fully understand the defect. It's all about gaining these orbs and manipulating them and understanding what orbs you want to have in which slots, so then you manipulate how they are in the cycle. Maybe you want to have the dark orb first because you want to do more damage to something when you evoke that orb. Maybe you don't need the dark orbs and maybe you're just stacking frozen orbs and then using Blizzard. It's all there, you just need to learn how to manipulate it. On top of that, well, Defect is the character that actually benefits from removing all your starting cards the most. While, let's say, Silent and Watcher and Ironclad can still work with what they get at the beginning, well, Defect doesn't really support their starting cards. There is so many different things that you would rather do than use your strike. I mean, defense are always useful because sometimes you just need that 5 block, but your strikes on a defect, you really don't need them, bar the beginning fights. So, for instance, the defect, you want to just remove all of your starting cards while adding more of the useful ones that let you manipulate your orbs, for instance. Or, hey, maybe, just maybe, you get the Claw. And keep in mind, Defect also has a lot of zero-cost cards that synergize with the Claw and synergize with drawing more zero-cost cards. So maybe you want to build into that instead of orbs. It's all there, you just need to find it. And then the last but not least is the Watcher. And I said she is a mixed bag because, well, she is just kind of boring. And what I mean by boring is, well, you have that one interesting mechanic, which is just switching stances. You have the Wrath stance and you have Calm stance. And in Calm, when you exit it, you gain some energy. And when you enter Wrath, you deal double damage, but you also take double damage. And then there's the third stance, which is Divinity, which gives you energy when you enter it and also triples your damage. And manipulating all of these is a skill in its own, but also because of how broken dealing double damage is sometimes, the Watcher just kind of feels like she always has the lethal. She's the most boring because of that, because runs on the Watcher are just really simple. Once you understand the basics, you just get it. And there are multiple things you can do. You can try going for pressure points, but they are not really supported. You can just try going for infinite with constantly switching between Calm and Wrath. You can go for the big bonk. You can maybe try weaving stances using Flurry of Blows, but basically Watcher just kind of like goes down the one path of constantly manipulating Wrath stance, sorry. And there isn't really much more to it, so the Watcher runs kind of end up in the same place and they are kind of boring. The Watcher also wants to have a thin deck, so you do benefit from removing cards, but not necessarily all your strikes in defense. It just, you want to remove cards. So yeah, we've talked a bit about the characters, but let's talk about the engine click moment. Now that is not a term I would coin or somebody else coined, it's just a very specific moment in almost every successful run. It usually happens like mid-Act 2 or early Act 3 at the latest. It's when suddenly your deck stops feeling random and starts feeling intentional. Cards cycle smoothly. Energy lines up perfectly. Relics trigger in sequence that you want them to trigger in. You're blocking without even trying and thinking about blocking. You're scaling faster than the enemy. The engine just clicks. And that feeling is unbelievably satisfying because you built it, not through meta progression, not through permanent stat boosts out of run, it's just through your own decisions alone, through your adaptation, through understanding, and that's a huge difference compared to more meta-heavy roguelites like Hades, where repeated runs inevitably make you stronger. In Slay the Spire, a new run resets you completely. Your power spike is earned every single time, and it just feels so good when you realize that you've been picking the correct cards every single time, and now you can just go off and you don't even need to sweat the slightest bit. And then there's Ascension mode. See, after beating the game, you unlock increasing difficulty modifiers. It's kind of like New Game Plus in RPGs, let's say, because, well, let's be honest, Slay the Spire on its baseline, while it can be tough, it is still pretty simple. And Ascension kind of just modifies the game in an interesting way more often than not. You see, Ascension 1 adds more elites, so there is less normal fights, there's more elite fights. On Ascension 5, you have reduced healing after defeating a boss, because on Ascension 0, you will heal up to full health after you defeat a boss. Well, now you're not healing to full health. You kind of need to make do. Ascension 10 adds a permanent curse to your deck, and holy, this is so impactful because suddenly you have a card that is not playable that you will sometimes just draw into, and that will screw you over. Oh yeah, and Ascension 20? Yeah, now you have to fight 2 Act 3 bosses back to back at the end of the run. Then there's also the Act 4 that I've maybe foreshadowed earlier, where you need to gain 3 keys that you will only be able to obtain if you've beaten the game once on Ironclad, once on the Defect, and once on the Silent. And when you do that, and you gain all 3 keys during a run, you unlocked Act 4, and you have another boss to deal with. And Ascension 20, while beating it hard, is quite hard. So yeah, Ascension is amazing. Of course, there are some lazy, quote-unquote, enemies have more health modifiers or enemies do more damage. But there are only a few of them. It's like basically 6 Ascensions out of 20 modify these things. There is normal enemies have more health and normal enemies are more deadly. And then there's one for elites and then there's one for bosses, but it's like, well, you kind of need to fill out 20 Ascensions, that's 1. And 2, when you learn the game and you just start trouncing through enemies, it kind of refreshes it when you can see that the enemies have more health and now you need to try a little bit harder, you need that little bit of extra damage and you need to find it. So yeah, I don't really mind that. I believe they feel necessary for the difficulty increase. These Ascension levels add something more to the game. They change incentives, they punish greed, they punish inefficient drafting, they punish sloppy play, and this is where the Slay the Spire reveals its true depth, because the higher you climb in Ascensions, the more the game becomes about micro-efficiency, pathing optimization, risk assessment, probability understanding. It almost becomes like chess, and yet it feels like it's never unfair. If you lose on high Ascension, you can usually trace the mistake back. A greedy elite 2 floors back, a bad boss relic pick, a bloated deck, a missing scaling opportunity. That transparency is so critical for this game. And here's something very important as well when you compare it to other roguelites. In games like Vampire Survivors or Hades, there is some meta progression that directly increases your baseline power. In Hades, you unlock upgrades, you start stronger because of that. But in Vampire Survivors, for instance, you can buy more banishes or rerolls that mitigate your RNG, and you can kind of more easily force yourself into the build you're searching for. Slay the Spire largely refuses to do that. Outside of unlocking more content, your starting power level remains static. You don't just grind your way into victory, you learn your way into victory. And that design choice is one of the biggest reasons the game feels so pure. It's not feeding you dopamine through permanent stat inflation. It's rewarding you for consistently mastering the skills and mastering the system. Look, I said earlier that this game kind of kickstarted an entire genre, so let's think about it. After Slay the Spire's success, we started seeing a pattern. New deck builders began adopting either map-based branching progression, some post-combat card reward screens, obviously that's a given, right? Some relic-style passive modifiers, some boss relic trade-offs, difficulty ladders similar to Ascension. So games like Monster Train or Roguebook or Inscription all share structural DNA with Slay the Spire. They are not the same, but they do have some things that Slay the Spire either introduced or expanded upon. But here's the difference between influence and imitation. Slay the Spire didn't just introduce mechanics, it introduced clarity of identity. It knew exactly what it was. A game about decision density. Every screen asks something from you. Do you want to draft or skip? Upgrade or heal? Do you want to risk that elite? Or maybe avoid it? Take the energy relic or preserve some sustain? There's no filler system. No bloated side mechanic. No half-committed identity crisis. And that focuses what allowed it to define the roguelite deck builders rather than just participate in them. Keep in mind, Slay the Spire isn't the first one, but it surely feels like it impacted it the most. When I talked about game identity before in my previous videos, I said that strong games know what they are, and Slay the Spire knows what it is. It doesn't chase spectacle, it doesn't dilute itself with unnecessary mechanics, it doesn't need you to go fishing in the middle of a game to find something. It doesn't compromise its core loop. It builds everything around information, trade-offs, adaptation, and mastery. And you don't get any weird minigames. Obviously there are some, but they are events that will progress you in a game. Like the Goblin events where you basically match 2 in the cards, right? And because of that, it became one of the rare games where you don't feel like you're fighting the system. You feel like you're learning it, and once you learn it, the game opens up in ways that feel almost endless. You can figure out so many weird, different, wacky combos if you just try enough, if you just understand what you can get. So hey, if you have not played STS yet, I would suggest either giving the first game a shot or, well, by the time you watch this video, early access for Slay the Spire 2 comes out and you'll be able to try it. Or it will be almost like a day away. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like and a sub, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.